Welcome to the Volunteer and Combination Officer Section weekly webinar series. This week, we're going to discuss the paid on call staffing model in fire departments. We have Deputy Chief Brian Scott here with us today. He's going to speak about that. But before I turn it over to Brian and have him introduce himself, I want to talk a little bit about the VCOS and what we're doing. One of the big things the VCOS doing today is encourage you to look at the OSHA proposed rulemaking, and if you're so inclined, tell them what you like about it and tell them what you don't like about it. If we don't say something now, once it becomes law, it is too late. So the VCOS does encourage you to get involved, write a letter, tell them your opinion. But if you have a negative opinion, give them a possible solution. Because if we are honest with ourselves, we are not just the volunteer fire service, but overall, we could be safer than what we are today. So with that, just encourage you to do that. We encourage you to register for Fire Rescue International. If you've attended Symposium in the Sun before, you have registration open. If you haven't attended Symposium in the Sun, which is in November, Clearwater Beach, Florida, the registration for first-time attendees or new personnel will be open next week. So we encourage you to do that. Hope to see you in Florida in November, where about 550 of our best friends show up, and we have a great time. 3.5 days of education, as well as being on the beach. You can walk right out of the hotel, about 20 feet, you're in the sand, and about another 100 yards, you're in the ocean. So we encourage you to do that. So as I said, we're going to talk about paid on call staffing model, which is something many fire departments don't do in this country, or at least what the VCOS knows is not done in this country. So we thought this would be a good topic to discuss some of the pros and cons of paid on call staffing. So I want to turn it over to Deputy Chief Brian Scott to introduce himself and maybe make an opening comment or two.
Chief Buckman, thank you very much, and very glad to be part of the presentation. Again, my name is Brian Scott. I'm the Deputy Chief with the Western Springs Fire Department. Western Springs is a suburban community just outside of the city of Chicago. It is a combination department, a department that has 10 full-time members and about 43 POC members or paid on call members that make it all work. A department that we think is doing a very extremely good job, a very viable model, and looking forward to talking about it today. A little bit about my background, over 30 years in the fire service. Over that 30-year span, experience in true volunteer departments, combination POC and career. The majority of my time I spent with the city of Evanston, which is a career department which borders the city of Chicago just to the north. Retired there as chief in 2021. And since then, I've been part of the Western Springs department, and it's been just a wonderful experience. I'm also a staff instructor with the Illinois Fire Service Institute, been doing that for approximately 18 years as well. So, Chief, I'm looking forward to having a good conversation because I really do think that the POC model has a place in the American Fire Service, and I hope to offer some positive suggestions and solutions to the folks out there that hopefully will make it a viable model for their community.
All right, Chief. Thank you. I'm smiling because Evanston, Illinois, our first medical director at my German Township Fire Department, he thought he was going to be hired by Deaconess Hospital in Evansville, Indiana, and he thought he was being hired in Evanston, Illinois.
Oh.
So he accepted the job, and then I guess read the letter, said, "Great, here, fly to Evansville and live here." It's like, so it is a small world. It really is. So before I start with the question, I failed to mention this at the beginning. The chat room is available. If you have questions, you want to ask a question, we encourage you to use the chat room. I'm monitoring that. Let me know who's here. That's always a nice thing. We got Vincent from New York is here, Chief. So that's one of our guys. Usually we'll get a few people tell us who you are. So the other thing, before I turn it back to a question for Chief Scott, we do send our best wishes and prayers to the Houston area, as well as all of Texas, is being impacted by the hurricane. and our brothers and sisters who are having to respond to call after call. We're sure for lines down, trees down, houses damaged, people needing to be rescued. Our thoughts and prayers are for those brothers and sisters who are working their tail off to try to save and help people out. So we know it's going to be a tough day. We have a good friend that lives in Houston. They were told to expect not to have power for 8 days.
Wow.
Imagine in Houston, no power for 8 days with temperatures probably in the 90 degrees. So, again, our thoughts and prayers and best wishes for our brothers and sisters and all of people in Texas. So, Chief, what made in Western Spring, or just in your experience, what makes paid on call a viable option for a department?
Well, when you look in the history of Western Springs, it started out like many communities, I think, in the United States, where it was strictly volunteer. So if you look at our history, for example, the department began in 1894, started out with 10 volunteers, and they were renting out a barn. As the community obviously developed over time, and again, it's a suburb of Chicago, so its population grew over the years. You'll see those demands for calls increase over time. And I think that the volunteer model lasted well, I think, into the 50s and into the 60s. But then they realized that as the calls of service go up, the training demands go up. They also needed to try to create an incentivization system, I think, to kind of bolster their ranks. And I think that's where you'll see the first beginnings of that paid on call model, where they're offering some type of incentive for firefighters to come in, to train, and those folks that contribute the most in those particular categories obviously get the greater benefit financially. I think as we get into the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Chief, let me stop you right there, because talk a little bit more about the incentives that you started with, just maybe to help our people know what incentive you started with in your department.
So I think presently it's working out where these guys are getting an hourly rate for example, if they come in for a call for service, that is a minimum 1 hour at their hourly rate, and that hourly rate ranges anywhere from $16 to $30 an hour presently. And I want to say this sincerely, that even though that is an incentive system, one of the things I enjoy about working on this particular department is that I would say to a person, no one is here for the paycheck. But certainly I think that it helps them in terms of working in their busy schedules and working with their family demands, that at least they're getting something on that monetary end, especially for those guys that really put in the extra effort that they do. They also get paid for their training time on an hourly basis. For those folks that reach certain benchmarks, certain degrees of excellence in those areas, they'll actually get a several $100 stipend at the end of the year as a bonus for their extra work in those particular areas. On the other side of it, there are minimums they have to make. So for example, our department typically runs 1,400 calls a year. You have to make a minimum of 10% of those calls in terms of callbacks to stay in good standing with the department. And we've also instituted some shift flexibility too, which I think has been really helpful in retaining the members that we have, because again, they're very busy. So we have the availability for our POC members to work 4-hour shifts, 8-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts. And collectively, across 43 members, those shifts get filled so that in the fire station at any given moment, we have our EMS component filled with contract paramedics, which we can talk about more as certainly a core component of our service delivery. But they're always supported in that POC model with those firefighters. And so they have the option of working the shifts, doing the callbacks, a combination of both. And then the training is certainly an important part of our model. And so they have to meet a minimum of 66% of our drills, which run Monday evenings. They go from 7 to 10 p.m. We have very, very good attendance with those drills. Our candidate firefighters have to make over 80% of those drills. The department certainly punches above its weight when it comes to training. In fact, We run our own in-house fire academy, fully state certified by the state of Illinois, over 280-hour academy in-house, and we do that every couple of years. And so when you look at our model, and we could talk about every single facet if we have time, Chief, but we look at that the academy is run with our in-house members and produces every couple of years about 15 to 20 new members into the ranks that kind of reinvigorates the organization.
Okay. When you were all volunteer and you started using incentives, are you aware of what they use for incentives back with the volunteers?
Not when they made that initial transition. I'm not aware of that, John, so I apologize.
That's right. Okay.
But
Right.
I will say this, the money and the increases in pay were very incremental. So understand too, especially back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, there was a lot more volunteer accommodation departments in the metro Chicago area. Western Springs is one of a handful at this point, but certainly a very, very viable one, along with a few others in this area. So again, there is a little bit of competition too. So that has to be considered as well.
Well, it's funny you mentioned, because I'm making notes. So no one is here for the paycheck. I was told that years ago by a guy named Jack Snook, Chief Jack Snook out of Oregon, who wrote the book Recruiting, Training, and Maintaining Volunteer Firefighters. He said, don't start paying your volunteers, because you know what they'll want tomorrow? More pay.
Well, that's not my experience here. In fact, let me share kind of a funny story. But here I leave the career side. I come here relatively new to the organization, and I'm working through payroll. And the chief financial officer for the village introduces herself and says, "Chief, can I talk to you for a moment?" I said, "Certainly." He says, "Can you do me a favor? I have about 7 or 8 of your firefighters that don't cash their checks." And I looked into it, and they just didn't care. So we had to work out a direct deposit arrangement with these guys so the village keep their books straight. But we have a number of firefighters here that could care less of what they're getting paid. The true value is their contribution to the community. And one of our challenges, to be honest, is that Western Springs a generation ago was a very middle class, blue collar community, and it's become more affluent over time. So in certain respects, it's been harder for us to recruit within the village boundaries proper. But having that said, we still have a number of volunteers that are professionals, they're lawyers, doctors, engineers. So even folks with very busy careers and very busy family lives still seem to find the time and have the incentive and get tremendous value in working as a volunteer firefighter or a POC firefighter.
Well, we do have Chief Brian on here from Tennessee, and Chief Michael is here from Tulsa, Oklahoma, joined us as well. And I'm sure there's other ones on here. We have many times people don't want to say they're here. It's like it's a big secret. So you talked about your community. I thought it was sort of funny. I'm actually going to Tennessee fire chiefs next week to speak, or this week, I guess. And I thought it was funny that you started running out of a barn. And one of the things I'm going to talk about, if Brian's going to make my presentation, is the tipping point in the volunteer fire service. Where are we? And what got us out of the barn into fire stations, and then now into real fire stations, public safety buildings, so on and so forth. It's like somebody had to have an idea. So when you look at the future of the even a paid on call system, as you just said, you're sustaining it. You're not just maintaining it, you're sustaining it. So can you share more, anything else about how you are sustaining the system and it works for you?
Well, I don't think this will come to surprise anybody, but it does all come down to being proactive and some hard work. So for us, it's been forming a recruitment committee, and that committee is comprised of all ranks of the organization. Really being outward looking in the community and trying to hit every single data point and communication point you can to try to reach out to as many people as possible. So obviously that's going to include aggressive use of social media, local newspapers and magazines. It's going to be a lot of networking. And we'd like to think that the folks that are already in the community, when they're at a block party or a local barbecue or in their church, they're well-respected members in the community already, that they can connect with their neighbors and friends and recruit even through that method. I think what's been important for us too is we get out to those community events and we talk to people face to face, walking the business district. I think, by the way, that the National Volunteer Fire Council and their Make Me a Firefighter website has been tremendously helpful. So I've run 2 recruitment campaigns in Western Springs, one in 21 and one in 2023. The second one had the benefit of the NVFC website, and the amount of applications we got in through that website increased our numbers about 25% in terms of the overall application pool. So you can see there's definitely an impact with using the web and using that particular website in particular.
Yes.
I think another important part for us has been we have a very good Fire Explorer program. And so using that program and integrating with the local high schools and being really aggressive with that program, we look at that program as kind of a feeder program into the POCs. And if those POCs want to move on to a career department, they're certainly welcome to do that, because we know that in Western Springs, we gave them their start and gave them their formative training as they launched into a full career in the fire service for those younger folks. We also find a very unique category in our recruitment, and that is we get certain professionals that are in their late 40s, early 50s. They've accomplished everything they wanted to accomplish in terms of their primary career, but they've always wanted to be a firefighter. They always wanted that challenge. They always wanted to do something a little bit extra for the community. And they'll approach us and say, hey, listen, I'm in good shape. I want to do this. I've got the time now. My kids are older. Am I welcome? And absolutely they are. We put them through the academy, and I would say almost to a person, they've been some of the best new hires we've made within the organization. They're really, really impressive. Again, they're really looking to take things to a new level in terms of their dedication to the community. And of course, I think the fire service is a great way to do that. So at the end of the day, it really becomes something that's very multifaceted, that you have to have buy-in through all levels of the organization. And it's got to be something that's got to be kind of nurtured and cultivated almost throughout the year. And so we have almost an open enrollment period in between those major recruitment pushes to make sure that we can be open and available and outreach to folks and continue that kind of dialogue with the community as much as possible.
Well, Chief, and I will say again about the National Volunteer Fire Council, they have tremendous tools out there to help you in recruiting and retaining volunteers. And it's primarily aimed at volunteers. That's their focus. But their Make Me a Firefighter web program is very good and has been very successful. So I encourage any attendees that want to go look at that to go look at that. So I got a couple questions. Well, one's a question for me, but I'll for Chief Brian. I'll be in Murfreesboro, Tennessee on this coming Sunday. Then I'll for a 4-hour workshop, and then on Monday, I'm the keynote speaker for the Tennessee Fire Chiefs in Murfreesboro. So, and if the workshop on Saturday is paid for with your SAFER grant, so it should be free. Just show up or talk to Eddie Phillips. Then question from Vincent. Vincent is from New York. Who pays for the staffing? Is it the authority having jurisdiction, the state, county, or town, and are taxpayer dollars used?
So for Western Springs, primarily it is the authority having jurisdiction. So the Village of Western Springs is funding this department. There also is some extra support that comes in from the Western Springs Fire Rescue Association. That's a separate organization run by the firefighters. They do community outreach and fundraisers, and they take the money from that. And they're just looking to buy extra equipment, things they can use for training, different things in terms of uniforms. So that is just a side benefit organization. And they do tremendous work in the community as well. We also have something, I think it's particular to Illinois, but it's called the foreign fire tax. So there's a special tax that's levied in Illinois for foreign insurance companies doing business in the state. Each municipal fire department gets a small percentage of that. So that funding comes in, and it's also directed towards the specific benefit of our department as well. So you'll find us buying equipment and uniforms and different things like that through that fund as well. So those are our three primary funding sources.
For those of you who have not heard of the foreign fire tax, I was a state fire academy director in Indiana. I knew all about that fire tax because it was when it was created by the insurance, when the insurance companies were willing to pay that, it was for training. It was to help firefighter training. And every state had it at one time. Now, what your state does with it, I don't know. But at one point in time, every state, well, maybe not Alaska and Hawaii, but every state on the continental United States had a foreign fire tax. So you might look into where's some of that money going. I know some fire departments get a considerable amount of money from that. And then Chief Scott, just so you know, I think this is still the law in New York. It's actually a law in New York that they can't pay volunteer firefighters. So you can't pay them per hour, per run, that sort of thing. And I'm pretty sure that law is still in existence. When they told me that years ago, I said, change the law. So, okay, let's go back to one of your comments. So I think you said you had 16 career people.
10 career, I guess you could say. So basically there is myself, a deputy chief, a training officer, and we have a lieutenant in charge of the bureau that runs our EMS division. Though they are career members. We have 2 part-time members that serve as day officers. I would consider them like company officers that kind of staff the company during the daytime where we have the greatest volume of calls. We have contract paramedics, which means that the village contracts with a private corporation and staffs 6 firefighter paramedics. So that's 2 per day. And that is a core service, obviously. And then the remaining balance of our staffing comes from those POCs, which they number 43 at this point.
I know you talked about having shift availability now for people to work shifts. So how are you still like home response, or you have staff on duty 24 hours a day? How does that work?
So out the door, you'll have it's a suppression ambulance jump company model. So if there's an ambulance call, that's the primary call. The 3 individuals, which would be the 2 contract paramedics and the POC, they're out the door. They take care of the call, and then the pagers go off, and then we get backfill in the station. Their primary responsibility, if it's a serious call, is to take additional apparatus out to the call and support. If it's managed, they backfill the station and wait for the next call to come in, and then they can take care of that and manage that. So that's generally how it works. And then, so you always have a POC here on staff, so to speak, filling a shift. But of course, any POC, anytime on any call is welcome to come in on the callback.
Okay. So, all right. So here's the dark question. Do you have union members? And how do the union members get along? You do not. Okay.
Well, forgive me. I think I misheard the question. So do we have union members? We are not a union department. Okay. Do we have union members that work part of our department? We do. And they get along wonderfully.
That was my next question. What's the relationship between, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. So in your case, it works out pretty well that, again, we can always have somebody has a bad attitude, but that's usually 1 or 2, 2 people. Right. So was there any circumstance that whenever you converted to, I'll say, a more prevalent paid on call system, was there any circumstance, or was it just a normal transition or a normal evolution to go from volunteer to paid on call?
Well, I wasn't part of the organization at that time, but my understanding, it was a gradual transition and again, it was not only just this department, but the majority of the other volunteer POC combination departments were going through as well. I think it did tie in generally to call demand increases. The demand for ALS care is also a big factor in this, where that really put an imposition on the volunteer fire service in this area, because to become a paramedic is a tremendous amount of time commitment and hours and continual training that a lot of volunteers weren't able to do. And so that necessitated, for example, the use of the contract system to get those paramedics in place, and the volunteers were supporting on the fire side. And now you're seeing more of a blended approach. So even our POC members have to have some degree of EMS training, whether it be EMR, first responder, EMT, or paramedic. They're allowed to go the full track if they want it, but most of our folks are in that EMR, EMTB level because, again, they'd love to do it, but it's the training that it's involved that becomes a big imposition on their lives. I think, by the way, the Illinois Fire Service Institute, especially lately, has done a fantastic job of kind of reorienting some of the programming towards the volunteer fire service, where typically a typical training course will go Monday through Friday for 40 hours, which takes out a lot of our POCs. Can't do it, Chief. Got to work. You're seeing IFSI now offer more and more training that's in the evenings or weekends, and our folks jump right on board and love taking that type of training. So that's been, again, that has always been a little bit of a factor, is the training demands is weighed against the scheduling of the average individual in the community and what they can balance with their busy lives.
And you bring it up. You use the word blended model. I like that because that's a philosophy. Because you can not have a blended model. You can have, the career people. In your case, you don't have that many career people, but full-time career people. But and then the paid on call, you can have a lot of conflict there. But I hear you saying your philosophy and your department and even your community, it is a blended model. You like it, and you're going to keep it going. So what do you think is going to have to happen to keep it successful in the future?
Well, I think in addition to those kind of proactive and earnest efforts with respect to recruitment, obviously that's a given. I think you've got to also look at, why do we keep people for as long as we do? We have a lot of people there that are here for 10, 15, 20 years. When we do lose people, it is generally for some really good reasons, like career change, family change, they're moving out of the community. We're not finding people leaving the organization because they're unhappy here. I think that speaks to a lot of the leadership of the organization over the years. People like Chief Pat Kenny, people like Chief Mike Kelly. When I came in the organization, things were operating extremely well here, and I hope to keep that moving in a positive direction. So I think people here feel valued. I also think that we value our POCs to a large extent, so that I consider these POCs, and I expect from these POCs everything I did when I was working on the career side. Our training is just as good as any career department in this area. And does that place a lot of extra work on our members? It does, but I think we do a good job of communicating why it's so important. And that I think, like any good firefighter, the better you are at your job, the more value and pride and esprit de corps you get in being part of that organization. I think that needs to continue going forward. And as long as we recognize and respect the hard work and life work balance these guys go through, and try to make, for example, the flexible scheduling that we try to offer. And I think with increased numbers, there's inherent flexibility with that too. Hopefully we can keep this model going. I think there are challenges though. I recognize that the numbers are down over the last 25 years for people volunteering into the American Fire Service. I recognize the fact that most folks have dual incomes in their household to keep things and keep their standard of living going. I also understand the fact that, in fact, John, I should tell you a quick story about one of the old timers stopped by. We had a cup of coffee, and he mentioned how, in 1950, if you were to join the Western Springs Fire Department, it was a handshake, a pat in the back, here's your boots, and you get to go on the rig. And now we are expecting a 280-hour fire academy. We're expecting our members average about 170 hours of training a year per person. It is a lot of work for these guys. And he was trying to, I think, express like, I'm not sure if I would have been all in if that was the requirement back in the 50s. I think he would have, but I think he was kind of appreciating how things have changed over time, and everything these guys have to go through. Plus, I think people just run busier lives these days. So I think we have to recognize that, but we at the same time, if we really truly value them, give them the tools and the training and the equipment and the medical evaluations and all those things that go in there. So far, they have answered the call, and we're glad to have them.
Well, sorry, it never fails. The radio starts talking when you're on a webinar. I thought I turned it down, but I'll get in trouble from the staff who manages this. They'll yell at me. But Chief, okay, there's two things I want to talk about because I see it in your tone, in your comments, and in your words, and I'm sure it translates into your actions. And that is, you are flexible. There are rules, there are certain standards that people have to meet, but you understand today's work-life balance challenges that your members face. So you tell me how you created, how did you get that philosophy? How did it happen for you?
Well, I think it was imparted upon me by previous leadership, but let me express some examples of what that means for us. So if we have members in the organization that are in good standing and there is something that changes in their life, it could be, for example, we had an individual that was a major executive in a major utility company here in Illinois. Had a number of years on a department, did an outstanding job. But when a guy comes in like that, has an excellent record and says, listen, I am swamped at work. My kids are at this particular age where the activities are out of control. Can I please take a leave of absence for the next year? Yeah, we make that accommodation. And I would say 8 out of 10 times that year or 2-year hiatus, they're right back. They're ready to go. We put them in through some re-entry training to get them back up to speed. And they begin. Now that individual I'm speaking about is right into the mix. And now, again, becomes a very positive contributing member to the organization. Sometimes there's a shorter term thing. Or folks are going through a tough time. Again, we should offer that flexibility. I think too, as it permeates through the organization where they understand that's an option, you see folks feeling more comfortable to have those conversations and kind of get into that dialogue with us and work something out for that works out for both sides. But there are some things that we're not going to. Again, if you're going to be part of the organization, you will meet our training standards. It's just simply down to safety at that point, and folks get that. We have a very, very good, strong officer corps, and so that's something I probably should mention too. We treat our officers like true officers. We have a full selection process that mirrors the career site, for example, and so that is something that's an important part of our organizational culture, is that we value the officers at all ranks. They're really, really important. It's a privilege to be an officer. And I think that helps maintain the organizational integrity and keeps people engaged, because they know that there's good leadership throughout the ranks. There's accountability where it matters, but also flexibility when it needs to happen for the betterment of the organization and the betterment of the individual.
Yeah, great, thank you, Chief. When you talked about ALS, Private Ambulance Service, and I know back when I was working, and I went to many communities who were trying to transition their department from an all volunteer, maybe or paid on call, or into a career department. And it wasn't about fire protection. It was about the ambulance. Is the public wants the ambulance service. They don't believe they're going to have a fire, but they believe they're going to have a heart attack or a car wreck. Maybe not every day, but they think that's more likely. And so I think I ask you, did the need for ambulance service have any impact on your department transitioning?
Absolutely, it did. Absolutely. I would, that, especially as it turned into, so we've been involved in providing emergency pre-hospital care since like 1949. We're one of the first communities in Illinois to do that. And we were one of the first communities to offer paramedic care back in the 70s. So to me, again, this department is always punched above its weight. But as you got into that ALS care in the 70s, again, the volunteer corps membership here couldn't meet that need, and that's when they had to contract out. And you, like you said, it's a community demand, absolutely. And our call volume, like most communities in the United States, is primarily EMS. We run about 65% of our calls are emergency medical calls, and the balance is then fire rescue after that. So that's why you see those contract paramedics in place, because that is a core function of what we need to do to meet the community need. And they've done a good job with that.
And, I'm sort of laughing because I remember it was probably my third public hearing meeting I went to on increasing taxes. And this resident got up and said, "Mr. Fire Chief, I don't care about the fire truck. I care that we have an ambulance service." I mean, he's yelling at him. And I thought, oh my God, there's the secret. We think it's about most fire chiefs think it's about fire trucks. And I'd say my experience is it's not. So I think that's, again, a lesson learned. If you're looking at transitioning from all volunteer to part-time, paid on call, to full career, I think that's one of the reasons to think about it is people want that ambulance. They don't want to wait 16 minutes for an ambulance. They want to wait 4 minutes. So,
and I do think there's a lot of departments in this area, including our own, that can provide a positive model where you can combine the two. You can blend, we'll use that term again, the EMS side of this thing with your volunteer fire side of this, and they can integrate and work together very, very well.
I forgot to say this a while ago, because when you talked about letting a person take a leave of absence, I was told this years ago. Actually, Chief Jack Snook's the one who told me the same comment, or same guy, is what about letting your volunteers have a vacation? And his comment was, you got some kids, their kids are doing things, and you say, you know what, take a 3-month vacation. Now, some departments would say, but if we get a house fire, will you show up? And that person would probably say yes. In your department, that may not work, but in smaller departments, that might work. But you don't have to get up for EMS calls in the middle of the night because you got things to do. So that may be an option for smaller departments, is say, take a vacation 30 days and then come back. So
I think especially if they've got some burnout, they've been through some really tough calls, I think that's an excellent option. Keeping good track of your people and how they're doing psychologically as well as physically. That could be a great kind of refresher point for somebody just to get away from it a little bit.
And again, I'm making notes. Keeping track of your people, you just made that statement. And I believe that that's one of the keys to letting somebody take a vacation, or in your case, take a leave of absence, is keeping track of them, calling them up. If they're on a year's leave of absence, you call them up every 30 or 60 days. You say, hey, how you doing?
Oh, no.
Fire department misses you. We care about you. Oh, hey, you were working on this project and you didn't finish it. You got any, helping them maintain that relationship, I think, is a key to getting them to return to active duty.
And let me add another thing to that too, is I think it's important that you get the entire family involved. So spouses and families are going to be really important on this. Obviously, we all realize that none of us are going to succeed in the fire service if we don't have support from the folks at home, family number one. So make every effort you can to integrate them into social events and things going on in the department. A great idea that came from Chief Pat Kenny, I understand that we've continued to this day, is, we have those Monday night drills. Well, once a year, for example, we have the spouses drill. And what that means is that only the wives can attend. There is some kind of primer in the beginning of some kind of training related to spouses in the fire service, but I think it pretty much quickly evolves into a nice social event for the spouses to get together. But the chief and deputy chief will start off the meeting, talk about how much we appreciate their support of their husbands and wives. By the way, while that's going on, all the firefighters are going to be at home watching the kids and taking care of business at home, so the spouses get a nice night out. And but again, it reemphasizes that how important they are, and how important they are to not only their husband or wife, but the fact of the matter is that none of this would work without their support, and the organization really needs them too.
Very, very good comment, and thanks, Chief. You just gave me an idea for a webinar. So,
Okay.
Because for those of you that are listening live today or listening to this recorded, Laramie County, Wyoming. I'm not saying I know every fire department, but I know a lot. They probably have the most active family support program I've ever heard. And so I'm going to get a hold of Chief Coy, and we're going to get him to come and do a webinar on family support and others as well. But I agree with Chief Scott is that, yes, family support is important. You know, if the spouse says you ain't going to the training tonight, guess what? You might go the first time, but you probably won't go the second time without their blessing. So very appropriate. So my final question or comment for the chief for some discussion, and anybody that's listening now wants to send us a question, come on and do that now, and we'll get that to Chief Scott. But you have not used the word leadership, Chief, because that's one of my words. I talk about it, I write about it. So how did you create the leadership philosophy, culture that makes your model successful?
Well, first things first, I think I walked into an excellent situation. So I may be standing on third base, but some great bosses ahead of me hit the triple. And so that's got to be set first and foremost. But in terms of maintaining a positive climate in the organization, which to me then feeds into a positive culture for the organization, again, it's looking at valuing the folks, understanding what they need, placing, I think, strong ideals and what we're trying to accomplish, being mission focused, and at the same time being clear about the expectations of how we're going to get there. And that's something I think that has been imparted to our officers to express down through the ranks. And again, I think it's something you have to cultivate and maintain over time. But we've been very, very fortunate, I think, in that regard. I think our officers treat our folks very well. They treat them with respect. They challenge them when appropriate. They support them when appropriate. And again, that is something I think from my point of vantage as a deputy chief and Chief Kelly's chief is something that we place a priority on. And so certainly good leadership is not an accident. I think good leadership is something that's got to be maintained and be exhausting, as you know, Chief Buckman, as an outstanding leader yourself. But certainly I'm glad you mentioned it because you can have all these other things in place. And if you don't have a positive climate in the organization that feeds into a good positive culture, this stuff will not be maintained. And so anything that we do have pop up, we're very proactive in dealing with because we all have personnel issues from time to time. But I think we've got a good, strong cadre of officers that handle things in a professional, positive, and constructive way.
Well, Chief, thank you so much. I don't see any more questions popping up. Sometimes, for those who are listening or are going to listen to it later, sometimes these guys agree to do stuff with me and they're going, what am I getting into with this guy? But I told Chief Scott, we'll be fine. We're not going to get any gotcha questions. Chief, you've done a great job explaining your system, explaining your philosophy, the words I would tell our attendees to go take home. There's lots of words, but positive climate. Creating that positive climate in your department will help your staffing model, whatever that model is. But that is create that positive climate within your leadership, within your members, and I think that will be successful. So, Chief Scott, you got any final comments you'd like to share with our attendees?
Chief Buckman, it was a pleasure talking with you this afternoon. I hope I was able to impart some positive strategies for the folks out there. Certainly working Western Springs has been a beautiful part of my career. I really enjoy working with these folks. Some of the most dedicated, talented people I've ever worked in my 30-year career are working in the Western Springs Fire Department, and I continue to be amazed day in and day out by these folks. So to all the volunteers out there, to all those guys working in combination POC departments, I tip my hat to you, just as I did when I was a career firefighter. I think the fire service just attracts the most unique, wonderful people in the world, and it's a pleasure to work with them.
Well, thank you. And since we don't have slides, so but Chief, would you like to share your email address with our attendees?
Sure, it's easy. It's bscott@wsprings.com. B as in boy, SCOTT @wsprings.com.
All right. Hope you all got that. My email is jmbuckman3rd@gmail.com. If you can't remember either one of us, and if you got a question for Chief Scott, I'll certainly get that to you. So we appreciate everybody attending today. We appreciate those who are listening to this. If you have comments about other webinars, other topics that you'd like to have discussed, please send me an email. Please fill out the survey. If you need a certificate for attending this, we're working on getting certificates electronically, but that's still a work in progress. And so if you need a certificate, if you email that's in Nora, in Phillips at iafc.org, and she'll get you an electronic certificate for your record. So with that, Chief Scott, again, I want to thank you very much. And, we all those who are listening, God bless you. We appreciate everything you do, and we appreciate your support. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.